Chair, the meeting is now live streaming on YouTube. Hand back to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, good evening and welcome members of the public and councillors to East Devon District Council's virtual overview committee meeting on Thursday the 12th of November 2020. I'm your chair, Councillor Nick Hookway, and I would also like to welcome anyone watching the meeting via live streaming. All participants here today are taking part remotely and the committee is being viewed online and recorded, so please bear this in mind throughout the meeting, and may I remind you to be careful with your language. May I also remind members that the Code of Conduct applies throughout this meeting. We also reserve the right to remove and disconnect any participant who is disrupting the meeting by whatever means. As this meeting is dependent upon internet connection and a power supply, in the event of a break in the internet connection or a power cut, please bear with us as we try to reconnect. If we are not able to reconnect after 15 minutes, the meeting will be adjourned and reconvened at a later date. Please check the committee page on our website for further details. Please make sure all microphones are muted when you are not speaking to avoid any background noise levels. Please keep your points short and do not interrupt when someone is speaking. If you wish to comment, please raise your electronic blue hand and wait to be called. All councillors have been sent the agenda for today's meeting. Any members of the public who want to view the agenda can do so by visiting our website at www.eastdevon.gov.uk. We will now start the committee by doing a roll call of all members here present. Can you please now unmute your microphone, and when you hear your name, please confirm by saying present. When you have confirmed you are present, please mute your microphone again.
Thank you. Councillor Blakey.
Present.
Councillor Desaram.
Present. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Councillor Hall.
Present.
Councillor Hartnell.
Present.
Councillor Hookway.
Present.
Councillor Johns.
Present, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ranger.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Woodward.
Present.
Thank you, Chair. The meeting is quorate.
Thank you very much. Right, agenda item 1, public speaking. There are 3 members of the public who have registered to speak and will be called on in the order in which they registered. Welcome, public speakers. You have 3 minutes and will be given a 30-second reminder of the time. My first call upon Mr. Richard Ely, please.
Hello, good evening, everybody. I've already sent an email to members of the committee, so I'll try not to repeat myself. First point to make is that I'm not in any way criticising the economic development team. We're talking about the item coming up, pages 28 to 30, the Our Towns study. The view we have is that the Our Towns study should be abandoned. It's no longer appropriate, it's slow and cumbersome, and we need quicker action with respect to our town centres, and that could provide. So what we're looking for is something much quicker, much more nimble, much simpler, much smaller, that we can use going forward in order to attract government funding, but also to contribute to the local plan and other neighbourhood plans and other longer term aspirations. So what I was suggesting as an alternative is that we have much smaller, nimbler, town-based teams, only 4 or 5 people, certainly no more. We don't want 8, 10, 12-man committees because we don't have time to do that. Our thinking is that the government is going to be bringing forward measures to assist town centres in the new year, and we need to have oven-ready projects up and running so that we can immediately apply for that funding when it comes up. We've seen in recent couple of years that that the government expects you to respond within 4, 5, 6, 8 weeks. And if we don't have something up and running, then we'll miss the boat, as we have done consistently over a very long period of time. So I don't want to get people's hopes up, because we are labouring under disadvantages. We don't have the deprivation statistics. We are coastal and market towns, and the government prefers cities. We've seen that. So I wouldn't want people to have high expectations of these town teams if we were to create them. But I do think we do need to give it a bit of a try. We mustn't underestimate the human resources that we have in our towns. There's lots and lots of able people who can contribute to this, because they can be invited in on an ad hoc basis. The other thing is that I think it does need to be collective. So town councils, district council and community groups all acting together is the basis on which these funding applications succeed. And if we don't do that and have a collaboration, then we won't win. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Healy. Okay, I now call upon Mr. Barry Hedges. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to talk to you tonight. I'm one of the team behind the traders group, which is known as Totally Locally Axminster. What I have to say also relates to agenda item 8. What I'd like to do is give you an insight that might just influence your thinking as you go forward on the huge issue of survival for town centres in East Devon. You will recall that Axminster was EDDC's priority town when it bid in 2019 for support for the government's High Streets Fund. The failure of that bid was one of a succession of potentially crippling blows for Axminster. The other big ones were major further job losses at Axminster Carpets and the closure of Trinity House, which was our anchor store. By the autumn of last year, I think it's true to say Axminster was in many people's eyes on its knees. And you'd expect the pandemic to have been the final knockout blow. But if you come back there today, you might just be surprised, because the town centre is actually starting to get back to its feet. A large part of that lies in the quite startling revival of Trinity House, which I'll leave Ian Stiles to talk about because his personal passion has made it happen. You might also know that there are now plans for Aldi to build a new store on part of the Carpets site. But around those key projects is growing expectation of better times ahead. For all the awful economic impact, the pandemic has perversely also made a contribution by fostering a strong community spirit, and along with it, a degree of loyalty to local traders that gives us real hope beyond lockdown. Totally Locally Axminster's various activities over the past year have in their own way helped to encourage this new belief in the town. There is now a real opportunity to revitalise Axminster, but if I have a worry, it is that it needs energy and action to crystallise the potential. If we spend the next 3 or 5 years talking about it as opposed to doing it, then the enthusiasm and along with it the opportunity could ebb away. In my view, Axminster is sorely in need of a proper vision for its town centre. We are one of the few towns and villages in this district that has never managed to put in place a neighbourhood plan to act as a guide. Given an exciting vision to sign up to, I think the community would rally behind it, and equally
30
important,
seconds, please.
so would investors. If the district and town councils took a lead and brought together representatives from groups right across the community, along with landlords significantly, we might just find that a vision is actually quite easily achieved at modest cost. I certainly don't envy you the task of setting priorities, but my appeal to you is not to put the issue of dying high streets on the back burner, because by the time you come up with a resuscitation strategy, it could well be too late for towns like Axminster. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Mr. Ian Stiles, please.
Good evening, and thank you for allowing me to put my point forward. I'm a managing director of Axminster Property and a 50% shareholder in Axminster Tool Centre. We represent something in the region of a portfolio of £25 million worth of mixed commercial and residential property within the Axe Valley. Trinity House, as Mr. Hedges has just alluded to, one of our schemes. It wasn't something I intended to purchase, but I felt Axminster was on its knees at the time that it came on the market, and without its being purchased and reinvested, I think Axminster would probably have been laid out flat. The project has taken considerable investment, but on the upside, with that investment and quality investment, in a time that is probably most unexpected, we have managed to let all of the 9 units there. They're quality units, and we have made a considerable investment. What we had was a plan. Now, what I wanted to say was that Axminster needs a plan. It needs to, I would invite the council to work closely with us commercial people whose job it is to make worthwhile and strong investments locally, so that we can create a plan of how the future is going to work. At present, I've probably got funds to the value of £6 million to invest within the Axe Valley. That's the remit of the fund's owners there. The speed to market is something we have an opportunity, rather a sorry time in our life, but the small towns now can fight back, and now's a time where we have to fight back, take changes to our town. And Axminster, which whilst we represent everybody within the Axe Valley, Axminster is one that I believe needs urgent and considerable investment. That investment is there, can be made, but we need some major changes. The town needs to change. And I think what I'm trying to say to you is that I'd like to see the council working with commercial investors such as ourselves to make quick decisions that don't take forever to go to consultation. I think 3 years ago there was a town plan, how it was going to be. I'm sorry, if we ran Axminster as a limited company, it would have fallen over. It nearly did. We now need to take a very strong, decisive way of working within the town that is both realistic for the buildings, sympathetic to its heritage, and also to benefit those people who actually live in the area. If you do get a chance to pop into Axminster, have a look and see how Trinity House is coming on, and how just after the lockdown we hope to open one of our most prestigious community buildings with the Waffle in centre, the Waffle Community House in the centre of Axminster. Then I think that would show you how that this commercial investment can actually make a town like Axminster return to the vibrant town that it was many, many years ago. Thank you for listening to me, and thank you for the time.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks very much indeed. Okay. Right. Thank you, all 3 of you, for your contributions. We will now put the public speakers back into the waiting room, and you are welcome to continue watching the meeting live on the council's YouTube page. Right, agenda item 2, minutes of the previous meeting of the committee held on the 24th of September 2020. If you have any comments on these minutes, please raise your electronic blue hand and state which minute you are referring to. Please also note that following the recent council decision, officers are working to change the ID system templates to default to the agreed term of chair for all meetings. Sarah, do we have any blue hands raised?
No, Chair, no blue hands raised, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so as there are no blue hands raised, I will take it that the minutes of the previous meeting are approved as a correct record. Thank you. Agenda item 3, apologies. Right, Debbie, who have we received apologies from, please?
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies from councillors Susie Bond, Steve Gazzard, Mike Allen and Fabian King. Thank you, Chair.
Right, thank you very much indeed. Okay. Agenda item 4, declarations of interest. Declarations of interest will be noted by roll call. Please now unmute your microphone, and when your name is called, please advise the type of interest and the reason. Then please mute your microphone again. Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Blakey.
None, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Dasaram.
None, no, please, none.
Thank you. Councillor Hall.
Thank you. Declaration of interest regarding agenda item 8 on the Devon County Council for the Axminster Division, and through localities grant, I have I allocated £1,000 towards our IT website revamp earlier in the year. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hartnell.
A personal interest in item 8 on the agenda. I'm run a business, post office and newsagent in Seaton.
Thank you. Councillor Hookway.
None, thank you.
Councillor Johns.
None, thank you.
Councillor Ranger.
None, thank you.
And Councillor Woodward. Is Councillor Woodward still with us?
I know we had a few connection problems earlier on this afternoon. Perhaps he'll come back with us. Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you very much indeed. Okay, agenda item 5, matters of urgency. There are no matters of urgency. Agenda item 6, confidential or exempt items. There are no confidential or exempt items. So agenda item 7, the draft financial strategy 2021 to 2030. The purpose of this item is to consider the draft financial strategy for 2021 to 2030. I will now invite Simon Davey, Strategic Lead for Finance, to present the draft strategy. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you, Chair. With your permission, I'd like to put up on the screen the actual agenda papers, just so I can follow through.
Of course.
I say that. But, okay. So the purpose of bringing this to your committee, Chair, and thank you for that, is it is an important document in terms of our financial picture and how we put together our budgets. So this sets the scene, if you like, as an overview of our financial situation, making a number of assumptions, but gives us a picture of what we think our finances will look like. And I thought it was useful bringing it to your committee particularly in terms of sort of a bit of background before in January you'll be presented with the detailed budget for 21-22, and this document really sets the scene for that. So I thought it'd be useful to go through this at your committee now, and then hopefully that will give some more insight. Detailed budget comes to you along with service plans. So it does cover a long period, but it gets updated annually. So it covers the period starting next financial year. Just to highlight, the plan covers the general fund, which basically is the fund that pays for all the services that we run at the council on a daily basis, with the exception of housing, in terms of us being a landlord, which is covered off in the housing revenue account. The housing revenue account has its own 30-year plan. That goes to the Housing Review Board in terms of approval and comes through council. That's been adopted and it has been running for a few years now. So this plan focuses on the general fund, the majority of all our other services apart from housing, and capital. What the plan lays out is some fundamental principles to be adopted, mainly around picking up from the draft council plan, words from that plan in terms of to secure the financial stability of the council as we continue to respond to recover from the pandemic. Key principle of our financial plan, in order to keep ourselves legal, if you like, is that we will produce an annually balanced budget whereby our expenditure is met from available resources. We'll keep the general fund balance with an adopted level, so we'll keep a general fund balance at the required level to deal with emergencies. And I think the next one to highlight to you is we planned, in terms of looking ahead at our finances, to keep the council tax within the annually announced guidelines from government in order to not trigger a referendum. So those are the key principles in terms of when we're looking at setting our budgets. This section of the report looks at the financial background and really just highlights the predicament that local authorities are in terms of significant reductions over many years in central government funding, particularly for district councils. So the council's seen a reduction in government funding of 60 pence in the pound from the start in 2010, when we saw a year-on-year reduction. So we're no different to any other council in that respect, in that every year, in terms of balancing our budgets, becomes a real difficult position for the council to do. So that section highlights that. In terms of a financial plan, a key element is looking ahead in terms of what do we think our finances, the picture will be over a number of years. In doing that, then we can plan when we get to, on an annual basis, of how we're going to balance our budgets. So just run through a little bit of detail in terms of putting together our medium-term financial plan, which looks 10 years ahead, looking at the income we've got available to us, but looking at the expenditure as well. I've taken the basis in terms of services that we run today, look at those budgets, and then project them forward over 10 years, taking into account such things as inflation, pay awards, contract agreements that I know about in terms of changes, any legislative changes that I need to factor into our plans, any demand changes as well in terms of the various services that we operate. So within the medium-term financial plan figures, which I'll run through in a moment, I've taken into account various factors, but it is based on the services that we operate as of today. There isn't any new elements in there other than the ones that I know we have to do. So it's services as we operate currently. I have allowed for some specifics, which the report highlights in terms of specifics I've picked up to highlight to you that I'm aware from services that are new. A key one, which is the third bullet point there, is we've got a step change in our refuse and recycling contract, which comes in from 22-23 in terms of when our council tax base grows above 72,000, there's a step change in our contract with Suez, which means a renegotiation at that point. That will add a significant cost to our annual outgoings in terms of refuse and recycling. And there'll also be a need for capital investment at that stage as well, in terms of mainly vehicles, which will be coming to the end of their useful lives at that point. Another key element to highlight to members, within the budget, I've assumed going forward that the council will commit, as it has this year, to nearly £250,000 in terms of carbon reduction programme. So that was put in our budget this year. It's quite a significant sum considering our net budget position and all the pressures we have on our budget. And it's certainly quite a significant commitment when you compare that to other councils in terms of a budget specifically allocated for carbon reduction. That isn't enough compared to what the programme sets out for us to achieve. And we will need to keep working on that, refreshing that in terms of the programme. And it's clear that we're going to need other funding to help us meet our objectives, whether that be through government, through the private sector. But it is a marker, quite a significant marker in your budget. The other point to sort of highlight, obviously, is around COVID-19. That's had a significant impact on the current year budget, mainly around our income generation. We saw a complete drop-off in a number of key income streams from April. They've picked up significantly, but we'll probably see a drop-off again now with the current restrictions. We have received additional monies from government, which has helped, and the government have also brought in a scheme to help us reimburse some of those income streams that we've lost. But it still means that for the current year, the council's looking at having to find sort of 1.2, 1.3 million of its own funds in order just to bridge that gap. But why that's important for the medium-term financial plan, it's looking to see over our income streams, what are they likely to do in future years. Council tax is important to us in terms of income, and obviously we're seeing quite a significant reduction in income from council tax in the current year in terms of our collections, and the same with business rates as well. So those elements have been factored into future years. If we carry on down, just highlighting to members, there's a useful reference in the report that you can click on that goes to our current budget book. And for members, that is a useful document. It does go through in quite a bit of detail in terms of the services that we operate and various costs involved, assets and staffing used in each of those services. So that's on our website and a useful reference point. What the report then looks at is going through some of the key areas that affect our finances. So government funding is obviously an essential element. There are two parts to that which really do affect our finances going forward. One is around business rate income, and one is around the new homes bonus. Sorry, I forgot what it was called. So they're two key income streams that we get currently, both bring into our revenue account £1.5 million each. In terms of business rates, we are currently significantly above the base scheme that the government brought in. So through growth in the district and a number of initiatives, we collect in about 1.5 million above the baseline that government assessed. The government has talked about, and will do, I'm sure, rebase all local authorities' business rates back down again. So to take that growth away, we've invested significantly to try and raise that business rate growth, but we will lose that income of 1.5 million if it's rebased. The timing of that and the exact figure is unknown, and that's a real problem when we're trying to plan ahead. So within the medium-term financial plan, I've assumed we will lose that additional income in 22-23, but there's no certainty in terms of date from the government, and there's no certainty in terms of what the new scheme will look like and whether we'll lose the full amount in year one or whether it will be on a transitional basis. So as I said, that makes planning quite difficult. So 22-23, I've taken out, when we look at the numbers, the full additional income that we get from business rates. The other element is new homes bonus. So at the moment, that's traditionally given us an additional 1.5 million in our revenue budget to help support services, and that's been reducing on a year-on-year basis and will fall out of our medium-term plan in 23-24 in its totality. This is a grant that the government gave in terms of rewarding authority for housing growth. So business rate growth was rewarded through business rate incentive. In terms of housing growth, we were rewarded through new homes bonus. That scheme is now demise, is in reduction in terms of we're only now paid certain amounts of that scheme and is likely to disappear completely. The government are intended to consult on a new scheme, but no details have come out as yet, with no dates issued, but certainly the old scheme is being run down. So those are two key elements in our financial planning that makes it really difficult in terms of their significant sums, and we don't know how much we're going to lose exactly, and we don't know when. The report then goes on in terms of council tax. So within the plan, I've assumed council tax will rise in line with the government guidelines, and then new homes bonus, which I've talked about. So if you put all those factors into our medium-term financial model, as I said, what it assumes is services that we run today. So you've got the current year budget, 2021. This is pre the effects of COVID. But our net costs of running our services after the income we receive from fees and charges is the 15.592 million, which hopefully you can see there. And then these are the various additional income other than fees and charges that we get, which balance our budget off for the current year. So coming to zero in terms of a balanced budget. Next year, we run through various elements affecting our budget, additional growth, pay and inflation, and then the effects of various elements in terms of funding coming through. And that gives us a deficit of nearly 700,000. At this stage, that's, and I'll show you another table in a minute which highlights it, but that's really just where expenditure on our services is growing quicker than the income coming into us. Because in 21-22, I haven't assumed those two key income losses will actually affect us. We've had announcements from government that because of COVID, what they're planning in terms of the finance settlement, the local government finance settlement, is almost a rollover year. So they're not planning anything fundamental. We'll have to wait and see until we get the actual settlement, which is normally not until the first week of December. But all the indications at the moment are they'll carry on with the existing funding as for 2021. And the big changes that I'm expecting will be in 22-23, when you can see, if you run through the budget, expenditure goes up to about 17 million, 17.6 million, but suddenly our income drops to 13.9. So in that year, our deficit suddenly increases to 3.7 million. And that's because of the new homes bonus and the reduction in business rates. The model then goes through and does that same prediction all the way through to 2030, 31, picking up the things as I've explained, like the changes in the refuse contract, when district councils elections are, various factors that affects our numbers, and then in terms of our income. But I think what's useful is to highlight this table, which takes that medium-term financial plan shortfall. So for 21-22 is the figure of 694,000 that we need to find. But then it significantly increases to just over 3 million we have to find in 22-23. These are based on the fact that if you find the 694,000 that year, brilliant, you've got a balanced budget. You move to 22-23 and you've got to find 3 million to give yourself a balanced budget again. If you find that, you move forward to 23-24 and you've got to find yourself another 1.2 million. So that's, in terms of finding that, that's a combination of either reducing your expenditure or generating more income. But these are significant numbers. So in splitting that, your underlying problem in terms of service costs outstripping income is this line. So as I said, for next year, we've got a deficit projected of 700,000. And then for 22-23, about 700,000 again. So that's a new amount, and then 421. But it's this line here that's really driving the big number and the change for us. And the difficulty the council has is to plan for that, in that to restructure our budget to save 2.278 million and then a further 822,000 is a big task and will have significant effect on service delivery. But if we were to start making those cuts or decisions now, it's premature until you know when this deficit's going to come in and how much it's going to be. So what the financial plan is suggesting, and has been adopted by Cabinet and through to Council, is because in 1920 we had a significantly good year regarding growth in business rates. That's predominantly the reason. Our general fund balance grew significantly at the end of 1920 to allow us to make the recommendation to put 2 million into a medium-term financial plan risk reserve. Now, the purpose of that, with the 2 million sat in a reserve, is if suddenly the government bring in these changes, in a December, when you have to set the budget in February, the following February, that only gives you a couple months to alter your service budget and service delivery significantly, by the council setting aside the £2 million, if necessary, if it comes to that short timing, the council can use that reserve to fund its services for another year to then give the authority time to react. But what it will be doing is reacting to a timing it knows and to an amount it knows. So it won't need to change its services over and beyond what it knows it needs to do, if that makes sense. If we carry on down, the report then looks at capital. Capital's a lot easier in some respect for members to control, in that it's based on individual projects. So it's easier to turn off and on the tap in terms of capital. Revenue's a lot difficult. It involves day-to-day costs, it involves staff, it involves contracts. Capital is normally a one-off project that you can either approve or not approve. There are difficulties around that, but it is easier. What's worked quite well and continue in terms of, we've got quite a significant process and governance around capital, and in terms of the bid process that comes through to the budget setting, the budget strategy and capital allocation panel, they'll be seeing capital bids coming through at their next meeting in early December. A lot of detail comes through, bid on a scheme by scheme basis for them to review, scrutinise. There's a methodology of scoring all of those projects and balancing up to the funds that we have available. So they will do the hard work in terms of going through probably 20, 30 projects to make recommendations through to Cabinet that will then come through to your committee to consider in the end of January. But we should be able to produce a balanced capital project based on prioritisation. That's what's contained in the financial plan. What I should have focused on, Chair, just talking about revenue again, is what we're working on at the moment is that deficit of 694,000. So from the financial plan, if my predictions were right, we're now going through the detailed budget process, which is at a very low level of building up our budgets from the base down. If I've got my overview calculations correct, once we've gone through that detailed calculation with budget managers, with strategic management team, with portfolio holders, those totals should come up with a deficit of 694,000. Well, they won't come to that exactly, but hopefully it'll be there or thereabouts to that sort of number. So we already need to plan how we're going to find that deficit. What the budget strategy and capital allocation panel have already seen and looked through in detail is this plan, but they've also had proposals come forward about giving us a steer as officers of where members would like to direct us or approve us to have a look at various initiatives to try and bridge that gap of 694 for next year. So there's a number of items in there in terms of income generation or reduction of expenditure that we're now working on that we can bring back to members for your consideration, that should bring proposals forward for 21-22 as a balanced budget, subject to those decisions being made. I could go through in more detail, but I think that's probably enough in terms of your agenda, Chair. I'm happy to take any questions.
Right, okay, thank you very much indeed, Simon. Okay, I will first invite non-members to speak by raising their virtual blue hand. Once non-members have spoken, I will then invite members of the committee to speak. Non-members, please indicate if you wish to speak.
So your first blue hand is from Councillor Andrew Moulding, Chair.
All right, thank you. Councillor Moulding, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. My only real question at this stage is probably to Simon Davey and indeed to yourself, and maybe even to the leader of the council, because I'm presuming that this same report will be going to scrutiny, not least that when the budget process rolls forward, it is a joint overview and scrutiny committee that needs to deliberate on the budget, and therefore all this information, which has been very well presented by Simon Davey, must be given to scrutiny in the same way that it's been given to overview. And I think we all know that scrutiny has not got such a busy programme within its future deliberations as perhaps overview have. And so there's plenty of spare space within the scrutiny programme for this same presentation to be made to scrutiny. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, if you're happy for me to come back.
Thank you, Simon. Yes, please.
Yeah, so more than happy to schedule in a similar presentation to scrutiny, and I think it would help in terms of getting them au fait with the overview before we get into the details. So I don't know whose permission I need, but I'm quite happy to liaise with the scrutiny chair.
Okay, thanks so much. Okay, Debbie, do we have any other non-members, please?
Yep, Councillor Paul Arnott, the leader, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Arnott, please.
Thank you, Chair. Only just to confirm exactly what Simon Davey has said, and it is, of course, a matter also for the discretion of the scrutiny chair, but as leader, I'd absolutely welcome it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay. Debbie, are there any more non-members, please?
No more non-members at the moment, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay. Members of the committee, please indicate if you wish to speak. Right. Okay. That's all. Okay. Yes, Debbie, did you want to say something? Yes.
No, just to say, first up is Councillor Bruce Desarum, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Desarum, please.
Good evening. Thank you very much, Chair. Well, congratulations, Simon. That was extremely well presented paper, and I think it's very positive. I only had a concern, really. I understand that we must protect our frontline services and that we must reduce the MTBF shortfall. So I'm concerned about the area on one of the pages 5, the commitment to the carbon reduction program, because it said that it's short of the full requirement. So I think this is potentially it could be described as a token gesture rather than a full commitment. So I'm not sure whether it should fit in there or whether it should go to, as you said in your paper, it should be included in the capital expenditure, which looks at individual projects and gets taken out of the revenue. So that's really my question. What would you, why is it in that particular area as opposed to in the capital section of the document? Simon, if you could answer that, please.
Yes, through the chair. It's when the capital programme was originally approved, it had a mixture of revenue and capital items within there, and as you quite rightly would expect, there are a number of capital type projects that would be applicable. What we've set aside, and in the current budget, it explains it in terms of by setting aside a third of a million or nearly a third of a million, that allows us to either spend on revenue or capital. A revenue budget allows you to spend on both, whereas a capital budget will only allow you to spend on capital. So by allowing an amount in revenue, we can switch that out to borrowing, in terms of we could make a commitment to borrow and use that money, so significantly multiply it up in terms of what we can afford to do on the back of 323,000, if that makes sense. So it is likely to be some capital projects, but what we're allowing for in revenue is to meet any borrowing costs that are associated with those projects.
Thank you, Simon. Very appreciated.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Right, so the next speaker is Councillor Tony Woodward. Tony, before you put your comments, can you please make any declarations of interest, please?
I suppose member of the Green Party. So that's fairly obvious, I would have thought. No other declarations of interest.
Thanks so much. Okay, all right. Okay, go ahead then, please.
So following on from Councillor Desarum's good point there, but I believe we should stick with the carbon reduction programme and the amount of funds that are there, even more possibly. But we made the declaration last year and we need to stick with that. Otherwise, it becomes a worthless declaration. I'm sure we wouldn't want to be known for that, damaging our reputation. It's the climate emergency has taken, I suppose, in many respects, a back seat as far as PR and the media is concerned because of COVID, and that's natural. But it's still there and it's still ongoing, and it'll be with us probably to the end of the century at least. So I think the funds should remain. There's no reason why the funds, as mentioned by Mr. Davey, be used for income and capital projects, and those can be used for the economy. They're not mutually exclusive, carbon reduction and the economy. They can be used together. You can have synergies between the two. So I do think we should stick with that figure in the report, and I hope that figure does stay in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Right, Councillor Ian Hall, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much, Simon Davey, for the report. With the business rates income, with revenue, obviously that's going to relate to the next agenda item 8. But my question is, when you were actually saying about the new homes bonus, did you say that is potentially going to be replaced? And the second question is, with the projected house building in the East Devon area in the next couple of years, do you think that's going to be affected drastically to our revenue income? Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, through you, Chair. Yes, so the new homes bonus scheme used to be paid for, so for every additional property you got an amount, and for us it was about £1,276. So you got that amount per property for 6 years. The government then didn't feel that the scheme was meeting its objectives. So we put out to consultation over a revised scheme, and at that point reduced payments down to 4 years. That consultation didn't go anywhere in terms of issuing a new scheme or any conclusions. And then the government, probably about 2 years ago, went out again to consultation and reduced the scheme down to, we only got 1 year payment basically guaranteed at a time. So that's why in the medium-term plan you can see significant reduction down, because I've just based it on what the government has issued to date. But having said that, there was always the new homes bonus monies that was set aside by government was top sliced from local government money. So what authorities used to get in revenue support grant as a general grant was top sliced, and then was used back to reimburse local authorities as an incentive to provide housing, if you like, within the district. There was a feeling in terms of the various papers issued by government that it wasn't sharp enough in terms of authorities were getting that income more by luck rather than strategy, in that if they just happened to be in a district that had housing growth, then they were getting the reward, and it wasn't a sharp enough incentive. So they were looking very much at trying to reward planning and those that had local plans in place or various elements that was rewarded because the authority's strategy increased housing. But nothing has come out in probably the last 2 years on that. So it's gone very quiet, but the existing scheme is diminishing.
Thank you, Simon, and I'm sure the rest of the committee will find that information very useful.
Okay, thank you. Right, let me just see, do we have any more? Right, well, I can't see any more blue hands. So at this point, we need to think about a recommendation to go to Cabinet. Would somebody like to put forward a recommendation, please? Councillor Desarum.
Thank you,
Bruce.
Chair. Yes, thank you, Chair. You're fading away somewhat, but I hope you can hear me. I don't know whether.
Yes, yes, I can.
Good, thank you. Oh, you're back now. Yes, I recommend that we recommend this. The financial plan has merits, and we recommend it. And we also make a note, as Councillor Woodward said, that we would be making this commitment as specified in the document. I think we need to say that we will be doing that, and if necessary, Council will work towards making up the shortfall, or whatever the shortfall is. So I think that's, as Councillor Woodward said, it's very key priority, and we must work towards it.
Thank you very much. Do we have a seconder?
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Right, okay. So, right, can we, Anita, can we just, are you clear about the recommendation?
I think we might just need Simon to provide the wording regarding the statement that needs to be made, the reference to Councillor Woodward referring to the statement. Simon, have you got a form of wording for that?
I think that it's the committee endorsed the sum allowed in the financial plan of 323,000 towards the carbon reduction programme.
Can't write that one. Okay, that's fine. So I think the wording then, Chair, is to recommend the adoption of the financial plan and to commit to endorse the sum. I've got commit to endorse the sum endorsed in the financial plan using the wording that Simon just said towards making up the shortfall. Does that work for you, Simon?
No, sorry, I think it is about endorsing the sum that's included in the financial plan. And I think the point being made was, and to work on how the shortfall in the carbon reduction programme is met. I think that's the point. The 323,000 will part meet the carbon reduction programme, but there is a significant sum still to be found. And I think that's the point that was being made, that we should try and endeavour to find that sum either through government funding or through the private sector.
Okay, that's fine. I've got that. So Councillor De Sarum as proposer, are you content with that wording?
I think it's excellent, a fantastic modification. I like the idea of working with the private sector. I think it spells out a very forward-looking council. So yeah, I think it's excellent. I don't know whether Councillor Woodward has any other thoughts on it.
Yes, that's excellent. Thank you, Simon and Bruce. Yeah, that's great.
Okay, good. Well, we have a recommendation. Can I ask members to vote? And Debbie, can you please record the vote and confirm, please?
Of course, Chair. So, members of the Overview Committee, if you can please press your green tick if you're in support of the recommendation, or the red X if you're against it, or raise your blue hand if you're abstaining from the vote. So for the benefit of those watching online, the vote is now taking place. Give it a few moments, Chair.
Yeah, me as well.
Thank you, Chair. The vote is concluded, and that is 8-4. That is carried, Chair, with no disagreements and no abstentions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Debbie. Right, thank you. Okay, thank you very much indeed, Simon, for your report and your hard work. Thank you very much. Right, okay, agenda item 8, the High Street TAF and Our Towns scheme update. The purpose of this item is to provide an update on the progress of the High Street TAF and the Our Towns scheme. I will now invite Andy Wood, Service Lead, Growth, Development and Prosperity, to present the report. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you, Chair. I think Rob's going to pick up on the Our Town study, who's on the call.
Okay.
If that's okay.
Yes, thank you. Yes, fine. Yes, okay. Thank you, Rob. Yes, ready when you are.
Thank you, Chair. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. So as you've mentioned, the report is more of an update really on the reasons behind the deferment for the Our Town study. Having read the short update, I can either take questions on that if preferred, or else I can run through and highlight some of the key elements of the update if members would prefer.
Well, let's do the key elements, shall we?
Let's go with that. So the intention behind the commissioning of the Our Town study, which was approved by Cabinet in 27th of November 2019, was to undertake an analysis of our towns to identify investment and funding opportunities, planning policy options, site-specific improvements and feasible projects. The process of gathering data then began in December 2019, and in January we had an inception meeting of the project steering group. In that meeting, a series of actions were agreed, which included economic development leading on an extensive data mapping exercise and the collation of wider evidence. This was to be made available for project group review in April, and we were to meet with Councillors Hartnell and Hookway and our Deputy Chief Executive to agree the focus and remit for the High Street task to complement the work. The data gathering was then delayed by the urgent redundancy response requirement at Axminster Carpets following their closure in February, with the loss of almost 90 jobs. This response, I hope, was well received, but regretfully, it was followed very quickly by the need for us to help mitigate the collapse of Flybe and the loss of almost 1,000 high-value jobs. With the onset of COVID and the unprecedented impact on businesses, economic development were then directed towards development of and delivery of the emergency grant programs, coming to close at the end of August. And I'm afraid we're now in this position again with the need to develop and administer both the local restrictions support grant with our business rate colleagues, and we're leading on the development and delivery of the additional restrictions grant. This will distribute millions more in additional grant funding to businesses to help mitigate the impact of the new national restrictions. A detailed overview of the impact of COVID-19 on our economy has been reported by Andy to Cabinet on the 28th of October, and this detailed the initiatives that have been undertaken to mitigate the impact and those planned to support delivery. I think I then move on to the detail of the deferment. The economic landscape, I think we're all very clear, has completely changed very dramatically since the beginning of the year, and any prior retail commercial use demand and need data will need to be completely updated. We need to ensure that the work, if we commission it, when we commission it, is able to respond to this new economic landscape. And the brief for the work needs to be completely recast to make sure that it doesn't quickly become outdated, and to make sure that it contributes to the wider recovery work across East Devon and across the county. The reality of our current response and recovery work focus is that we can't give an anticipated date for resumption of the Our Town study at present. It will be included as an aspiration within our 2021-22 service plan, and we can update when we feel that we're able to prioritise the work. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Rob. Very concise. Okay, I will first invite non-members to speak by raising their virtual blue hand. Once non-members have spoken, I will then invite members of the committee to speak. So non-members, please indicate if you wish to speak. Debbie, do we have any non-members, please?
We do, Chair. First up is Councillor Andrew Moulding.
Councillor Moulding, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm sure that all members of the Overview Committee listened carefully to the three speakers at the early part of the meeting. And Mr. Ely spoke generally about the need for projects to be brought forward, oven-ready projects to be brought forward so that we can move swiftly forward to help our towns. That was followed up by Mr. Hedges from my own town of Axminster. He represents Totally Locally, and he again was concerned about job losses. He was delighted with the Trinity House revival, as you heard, and he is also praising loyalty from customers. But he also said that energy and action is needed now to make sure that our towns can thrive again. Irrespective of COVID, this work needs to go on and it needs to be done swiftly. Now, that was also followed up by Ian Stiles from Axminster Property, who has led the fantastic project on Trinity House in Axminster. He's let all 9 units, but he says that we need to work with commercial people towards a plan, and that work needs to start now. Axminster, as other towns, still needs urgent investment. There are empty shops, there are struggling businesses, and I appreciate there is recovery work to be done, but I see no reason why the work to help our towns with this study cannot be run alongside that recovery work. Our shops are struggling. They now need our assistance. We can't wait until the 2021-2022 service planning process. That's at least 2 years before that service planning process is done. We can't wait 2 years before we get something done to help our small businesses and our retail units in our town. These issues are immediate. We need a short and medium-term strategy for our town centres, which should be set in place as soon as possible.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Moulding. Debbie, who's next, please?
Next up is Councillor Kevin Blakey.
Okay, Councillor Blakey, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair, but I'm actually on the committee, so I've been a little bit previous in sticking my hand up. I beg your pardon.
Okay, carry on anyway. Yeah, all right.
I can carry on anyway, can I?
Yes, please carry on, yes.
Okay. Actually, I'm going to disagree with Councillor Moulding on this because it seems to me to be perfectly sensible to defer the study, because that's what we're talking about. It's not the other action that's being taken place by the economic unit, it is the study itself. And it makes no sense to continue a study that, based on current circumstances, will produce an entirely different result to what it is likely to produce when the current economic difficulties are behind us, hoping that they will go behind us at some point in the next year or so. But it also, in addition to that, I would also ask that not as hitherto, but that Cranbrook should be included within that study. Now, previously it was agreed that Cranbrook would not form part of it because it is a new town, and it was expected that the development of the town would be funded and organised through the private commercial investment of the developers and other commercial concerns. Following the decision of the Strategic Planning Committee to follow officers' advice and pursue possibly a supplementary planning document for Cranbrook, rather than going through the developers' way of delivering, it's very likely that EDDC is going to have to invest significant sums of money in Cranbrook if a town centre is to be delivered, and therefore it seems to me that we should have a pretty detailed idea of what the existing economic activity is, although it wouldn't take a genius to spot that in the town centre that at the moment is zero if you ignore the pub, but actually what the opportunities are, and that can feed into the investment proposals that will have to come to the council in the future, always assuming that the current negotiations with the developers don't produce the result that the SPC and the council find acceptable. So perhaps, Rob Murray, if you would comment on that and whether you think that that is a sensible approach for what will be eventually the I think the second largest town in East Devon. Over to you, Rob. Oh, through the chair, I beg your pardon. Sorry, Nick.
That's fine, yes. Rob, would you care to respond to that, please?
Indeed. I think originally when I first drafted the brief for the work, Cranbrook was included. So I don't see any reason why we can't include it now. I'll obviously speak to Andy about that, but I'm perfectly happy that it be brought into the remit of the study.
Okay, thank you. Debbie, Excuse me, thank you. Debbie, do we have any other non-members wishing to speak, please?
Yes, Chair, we do. Next is Councillor Paul Arnott.
Thank you. Councillor Arnott, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll be brief. I'd just like to support what Councillor Blakey has said in both respects. Yes, to include Cranbrook, and yes, to accept the recommendations, although we're not on the committee, although he is. So I'd back those. Just to comment on Axminster, delighted to see Mr. Stiles here tonight, and really interesting that he's mentioned really the whole Lower Axe Valley. He is currently involved in helping develop the town mill site in Collerton, which has been derelict since we moved here 20 years ago. So very grateful for that work and for all the energy and initiative and passion that's going into the whole Lower Axe Valley, and obviously particularly in Axminster itself. I think this is a moment where we move forward. I think if you look backwards in Axminster, you have to say, where was the neighbourhood plan? Where was it? You know, that should reverberate around the room slightly. There's nothing we can do about it now, but it's such a pity that such a wonderful small town failed to produce its own neighbourhood plan. It is clearly in need of regeneration, and I would entirely endorse the idea that the district puts itself at the centre of that. So therefore, Chair, what I would just like to say now, although it doesn't affect your recommendations, is that we would love to meet with all of the interested parties, as suggested by Mr. Hedges and by Mr. Stiles, sit round a table and with Rob and with everybody else who might be relevant, and look at the broad picture of Axminster and the Lower Axe Valley and see how we can move that forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Arnott. Okay. I'm just writing that down. Right. Okay. Right. Okay. Okay. So, Debbie, do you have any other non-members to speak, please?
Yes, Chairman. Councillor Paul Hayward.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Hayward, please.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to Councillor Arnott, who obviously had access to my notes because has virtually said verbatim what I was going to say. So I thank him for that. So I'm not going to waste the committee's time by re-going over those areas. One of the first acts, in fact, I think the first act when I was delighted to be appointed as the portfolio holder for economy was to contact each and every one of the chambers of commerce in the 7 major towns, the 8 major towns, my apologies, in East Devon, and invite them to meet with me and tell me what it was they wanted. Now, of course, at that point, we were in the middle of lockdown 1. We all thought we were coming out of that. But here we are again in lockdown 2. I know they don't like the phrase lockdown 2, but that's what everyone in the wider world calls it. So yes, time is of the essence, without a doubt. But using old data and using old information of a time that no longer exists is flawed. I mean, a speaker yesterday referred to the famous Albert Einstein quote, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result is the very idea of insanity. And that's quite right. We've got to have new vision. We've got to have new goals. And yes, we could look forward into Axminster's past and wonder why regeneration boards weren't started. I think we've done that argument to death. We must move forward, and I'd be delighted to work with Rob and Andy and other officers and meet the key stakeholders and meet business leaders and meet business owners themselves and hear for themselves what they perceive to be the mutual growth and the mutual improvement of Axminster. It can't all be commercial. It can't all be driven by a district council or a town council, but all the stakeholders need to be involved at the very outset. And this applies to each and every town, not just Axminster. Seaton is woefully underfunded and has been ignored in the past. That needs investment. Exmouth is already one of the towns that's being studied. That needs support. It's the biggest town in East Devon. And I wholeheartedly support Councillor Blakey's request that Cranbrook, which will be the second biggest town, must equally be given support. The Strategic Planning Committee is has voted for significant investment into that town centre to make it something fit for purpose for the future, not using old data, but using the future that's coming to drive our decision making, proper decision making, fact-based. Now, of course, the big elephant in the room coming round the corner on January the 1st is another issue which will cause economic upsets and economic ripples, which we will have to weather that storm. So on this basis, I think it would be prudent to park the Our Town study, but recognising that there are a whole gamut of other projects going ahead, funding projects, officer time. And yes, we would be delighted if we could focus at the moment all of our offers of resource across the entire council on the jobs that they are experienced in, skilled in, and do very well. But at the moment, we're having to throw huge amounts of resource at dealing with a global pandemic, something we've never had to contend with before. So we effectively have the perfect storm now of a pandemic when the economy is being ripped to shreds, people's lives are being devastated, and the fact that our high streets were struggling before and they're struggling even more now. So all I can say is rest assured to all members across the political spectrum, this council is doing everything it can to help business. It's not anti-business, it's not anti-development, but we are the custodian of public funds. And whereas a private company is answerable to its shareholders, or in some cases, just its directorate, we are answerable to 150,000 individuals in this district. And therefore, everything we must do must be measured, it must be legal, it must be proper, and it must be considered and voted upon in a democratic way. And unfortunately, that's the nature of councils. And I know people lambast it, but that's the nature of democracy. We must vote, we consider, it can be taken back to scrutiny, it can be called in. That's what private business doesn't have to contend with. But we rise to the challenge, we all work together because we know the end result is a more vibrant and economically stable East Devon. So I welcome to hear what the committee discusses, and I'll be listening intently. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hayward. Debbie, do we have any more non-members?
No more non-members, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Right, okay, so in that case, if there are any committee members who now wish to speak, would you please raise your blue hand? Councillor Woodward, please.
Thank you, Chair. No, I'd like to support Councillor Blakey's two recommendations for, as he set out, and possibly at the same time take on board the private sector's interests that we should have, and possibly have a working party to look at trends which are coming through from the government, from the output from COVID, and there'll be Brexit in the new year. And a working party can then work with the private sector and take on board their projects and initiatives. And I think we might have a better outcome that way, rather than continuing with the TAF, which is rather very limited in its approach, I think, and the information which it's already got. I think we could do a wider adoption of practices based on what Councillor Blakey has said. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Woodward. Councillor Marcus Hartnell.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank the three speakers this evening that have made some very valid points, and I'm not sure from what I'm hearing so far from members that we're actually understanding the seriousness of the situation on the high street. The report I totally agree with. The Our Town study, it's not the right time now to be looking at that. But as a council, I do feel we shouldn't overlook the high street, and we do need at this time to be trying to do everything we can to give the high street an opportunity to fight back when they reopen at the beginning of December. I've already spoken with Rob regards to this, with Rob Murray, and it's things that we can do to assist small businesses with creating a more of a digital presence. So there's a lot of businesses that I'm aware of that are working now on websites, and they're as busy now with their web-based business as they are in their shops. So although their shops are closed, they are now selling online, and that's whether that's through their own website or whether that's through Amazon or eBay. They're actually working extremely hard to keep their businesses going. And what I see our role as being now is to actually help and assist businesses to either set up a digital presence or to enhance and improve an existing digital presence that they may have. And I wonder whether that's where at this moment in time, the £50,000 that we've been looking to spend on the Our Town study should be maybe redeployed as an emergency fund to actually help some of these small businesses to create this digital high street that we perhaps need to bring forward. Because as I see it, if we can create a digital high street for each town in East Devon, or even a digital East Devon, we need to encourage our residents and people to go online and shop with these local businesses as opposed to defaulting to Amazon and eBay straight away. So I just wonder whether the Our Town study one question I have for Rob is whether the Our Town study is actually necessary as we now look to rewrite our local plan. And I wonder how much duplication there may be there as we look to work up policies and gather evidence for our new local plan. I'd hate to see £50,000 spent on a piece of work that potentially could be duplicated. So that would be my first question. And the second question, I suppose, would be: is it actually something where this £50,000 could be redeployed into assisting high streets now, rather than the Our Town study? So those would be my two questions at this stage, Rob. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Marcus. Okay, Rob, would you care to comment on Councillor Hartnell's questions?
Sure. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Hartnell, and I would join him in commending the three speakers we had at the beginning of the session, public speakers, and offer our thanks to Ian, Barry and Richard for their perspectives. Two questions there, one around local plan, one around digital engagement. The Our Towns study, when Cabinet approved the funding, it was to be funded from the business, I think it's the retained business rates or the business rate pilot. And there's a condition that funding must be used for economic development or economy projects. I think Simon will quickly correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure. What Councillor Hartnell has described there in terms of a programme of investment to support businesses with digital engagement, the identification of new innovations, and essentially increased resilience and a reduced dependence on physical footfall, I think it would fall quite well within the requirements of that business rates pool. But again, I'll take advice on that. As for the local plan, I remember at the beginning of the year, we were fairly insistent that the Our Town study be used or be useful in the development of planning policy for the new local plan. But at the time, the local plan wasn't looked to be on a longer time frame. How times have changed, because now it's the Our Towns that is being delayed and the local plan that's coming forward in the shorter term. So there will be planning policy colleagues will be commissioning high street data and town centre data to inform their evidence base. We're having a consultation with them in the next week or two, I think, on the economy chapter, which is in a very, very early draft form, and just want to discuss key elements. So I should think that there will be plenty of evidence coming through that local plan policy development that would be relevant to the Our Towns and vice versa. So it's not a decision that I can make here for you today, but there's certainly some interesting concepts put forward.
Thanks so much indeed, Rob. Councillor Fowle-Ranger, please.
Thank you. So it seems to me that even just the heading of this subject, Our Towns Deferral, is unfortunate in that it seems to imply that we would stop doing what we were doing now, but do what we were doing now, do it later. So I think the idea we've already heard, there's councillors willing to work with individual towns, you know, the commercial sector willing to work on their own towns. Who knows towns better than the people that live, shop, work there, and are the parish councillors, town councillors, and district councillors, and the chambers of commerce. So it feels to me like it doesn't really need to be an either or. That, you know, each individual town, there's a will to be working on them and supporting them now. And I think, yes, later on, our towns would fit better with the local plan when it's less, you know, that's where it's more of an overview locally rather than specific to each town. So I think we do, you know, it does need to be more, as Richard Ely was saying, more nimble. What happens now and in the near future, much more fitting and bespoke for each town. And then later on, the time and energy for our towns project going actually into the local plan, which I suppose has already been said. Yes, I think it's a shame that the Axminster obviously hasn't had a neighbourhood plan. That's regretful. But, you know, clearly perhaps people are seeing now the folly of not getting on with that. And perhaps that's also something that could be got on with more quickly. In terms of the funding, I think I was very concerned if that meant a consultant, you know, fees being spent on a consultant, because we know how it can be with consultants that don't really know our towns. And how individual they are very well. So I would like to see individual town work happening now and in the near future, and the R towns going much more towards the local plan. That makes sense.
Yes, okay, thank you very much indeed. Councillor Bruce DeSara.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think I commend all three of the earlier public speakers, and I think that Richard Ely put forward something about, he spoke about oven-ready projects, and I know Councillor Hayward said that there are other projects at this moment in time. So I think that what we've heard from Councillor Hartnett tonight about supporting the digital economy, I would be more than happy to second that proposal if it came to members. I would second the proposal to create a digital presence, obviously subject to funding, but I think that's something that we could achieve, and it would be oven ready, and therefore it would fit with what the earlier speaker spoke about, that we obviously have issues with our towns, as Councillor Ranger quite rightly identified. So I think we need to put forward positive steps, and so I would be happy certainly to second the proposal that we set up a digital presence, because I think Rob Murray also indicated that it was a possibility, obviously subject to the issue of funding. So obviously we need to sort that out, and if we can sort that out, then I think it's oven ready and good to go. So that's what I want to say. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Bruce. Councillor Val Ranger, you want to come back on that?
Sorry, just one point I did want to make. I do. Ooh, am I unmuted? Yes. I do support the digital presence, but equally, I was in Axminster the other day. You know, the market was going on in town. Trinity House, you know, I could see the shop windows full of people were buzzing around the town. I think we do need not to fall into that trap that where we think, you know, that high street is over and it's all digital, because I think we need the digital presence, but we need people want to go to towns and interact with other people and, you know, have a coffee and browse the shops and go to the markets. You know, this is what buzzing, thriving towns are all about. I mean, if a town is dead and flat, who wants to go and visit it? So, you know, I think it is a balance. I think we do need to support digital, especially right now when we haven't got the choice. But, you know, equally in the longer term, I still think people need human contact, and do like to still go and gather, especially in our unique towns, where we still have individual towns as opposed to kind of amorphic big store, you know, city centre stores that are just soulless, faceless places that want your money. Yes. That's my point.
Okay, thanks so much. Councillor Ian Hall, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Before I go into my prepared notes. Can I ask for you, Chair, Rob, a quick question?
Yes, please do. Yes.
Rob, how many were in your team prior to COVID, and how many members have you got in your team now, please?
It depends whether are you talking about the wider growth, development and prosperity team or economic development specifically?
Economic development.
Economic development now consists of 2 officers, myself and my colleague Jerry.
Thank you very much. So I'd like to thank Richard Ely, Barry Hedges and Ian Stiles. I've had discussions with all 3 of these people over the last 6 months, and looking from the lens of what I would say is boots on the ground, you could see that they do have local expertise on these areas, and you can see to them delaying isn't really an option. We do know that we are in a very difficult situation at the moment, but I believe that we've got to give ourselves every single opportunity to think differently. If we do wait another year and a half, 2 years, we could be in a lot of trouble. When it comes to the digitalized side of things, we know that in the Axminster area, they're starting to do that through Totally Locally. And they are actually getting really good traction with this way of thinking. Now, it may or may not have been indicated, but this £50,000 was actually put forward for consultees in last year's cabinet papers. Could that not be thought of that could be actually divvied up, giving some, what I would say is seed money to those areas that we know are really getting on with this, and this would be evidence-based. They could bring it to, because I really do feel the local chambers of commerce, the local enterprise like Totally Locally, and the town councils could be part of the solution here. And so we are getting that lens straight away, and we could be gathering this information over a period of time. And then when we are coming out of the pandemic, we can just jump into it and glue it all together. So we do have a strategy. Now, when it comes to areas like neighbourhood plan, I absolutely agree. I wish Axminster did have a neighbourhood plan. That is an evolving neighbourhood plan. And I know that they actually have a dedicated councillor for that now. And I know that when Councillor Hayward was Mayor of Axminster, I'm sure that he put a lot of effort into helping that along. So what we've got to do is make sure that we can share best practice now. But one thing what we've got to be really mindful here is that we've also got to think of the climate emergency, about shopping locally and using that, because this is what the people want to see. We've signed up to the climate emergency at town, district and county level. We've got to give it every opportunity to really support a high street, to stop people travelling in their cars. We really, really need to look at private investors as being part of the solution. We're incredibly lucky in the Axe Valley area, all the way from Axminster, all the way in Colleton and Seaton as well, because we've got vision from some of the private investors. But what we don't want to do is frustrate this and take the wind out the sails, because private investors, they can encourage even more private investors to actually help us be part of the solution going forward. But I do not think pausing this is going to help in any way or form. So would my fellow committee members consider that we could actually look at recommending to Cabinet to think again if we could actually use this £50,000 or part of the £50,000, it doesn't have to be total, and maybe get into some consultation with the local towns, chambers of commerce and areas like Totally Locally to see how they would feel about being involved in these sort of initiatives. Because I think it really let's give people the chance of their local towns to actually get on board here and be part of the solution. Because we don't know when this pandemic's going away. Yes, it's great news that they may have a vaccine, but we don't know when it's going to be in and everybody's going to be. We could be in this situation for another 2, 3, 4 years. Going online is a very, very important part of this, going digital. I would ask us just to pause, maybe think of a different recommendation to take the Cabinet. Pausing, in my opinion, isn't an option. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Ian. Councillor Marcus Hartnell.
Thank you, Chair. Really pleased to hear some positive reactions to some of the words that I'd said earlier. And off the back of that, I'd actually like to make a proposal. So I'd like to propose that the committee recommends to Cabinet that the £50,000 is diverted to assist our economic development team to work with our key coastal and market towns, to include councils and key business stakeholders and investors, so we can better understand the challenges, opportunities and aspirations of each town and work collaboratively to attract funding and to support businesses as they adapt to the COVID situation. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, I'm happy to second that, Ian Hall.
I have the word. Do you want me to email that to you?
No.
Yes, please.
Yes, Renita. Yes. Okay. Right. Well, thank you for seconding that. Okay. Right. Councillor Woodward.
Well, just to confirm, I must make it beyond doubt that should include Cranbrook. You said coastal and market. I'm not sure that Cranbrook comes into either category. So Cranbrook should be included in that.
Okay. Right. Okay. Have we got anybody else there? No, I just wanted to really do some tidying up, really, and also make a suggestion if the committee agree to that. One of the things we've talked about the Our Towns study and need to adapt that, but we've also got a TAF that's supposed to be running on the high street. And due to the current situation that we're now in, I can't see that TAF ever coming to a natural conclusion. And therefore, I'd like to make the following suggestions. That first of all, that the high street TAF in its current form is closed, is finished with, because we can't carry on with it. And secondly, that we form a working party called the Town Centre Working Party to look specifically at all the issues that we've raised and to try to monitor what's happening to our town centres to see if we can find any trends, and that this Town Centre Working Party meet at least 4 times a year. Now, those are my suggestions. I would like to know what other committee members think about that, because I think we just need to remove the loose ends that exist at the present time. Okay, over to the committee. Councillor Hartnell.
Thank you, Chair. Totally agree that it's not appropriate now for the TAF to continue. I think we're in a completely new situation here now that we need to actually react much quicker to the situation that we're faced with. And I think, you know, some of the phrases we've heard this evening from our speakers are around us acting sort of more nimbly, working together, doing sort of action rather than talking. All these sorts of words and phrases that have been used this evening are actually asking the council, quite rightly, to actually work quickly and to react to the crisis that's on our high street. And I don't see any better way at this moment to respond to that than to divert this funding to assist the high street quickly. I don't see the option of having any kind of meetings once every or 4 a year. I don't think that's going to react quickly enough to the problem that we're faced with. So, you know, I still stick with the proposal that I've put forward. Happy to amend it to make sure it does include Cranbrook, because that is equally important as a town in East Devon. So as our coastal and market town. So I'm happy to amend that, but I'd stand by the proposal that I've already put forward, Chair. Thank you.
That's fine. Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much. Right, Andy Wood. You wanted to come in here.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Sorry, I've been listening to the debate, which has been really interesting for me. Thank you to everyone that's spoken. I just wanted to pick up on a few points, just to hopefully provide a bit more kind of context in terms of things that are underway and relate to recent Cabinet papers and ones that will be forthcoming in the near future. Just wanted to go back to Simon Davey's item, first of all, because I think one of the interesting aspects for us as a district is that we have the largest regional logistics site under development of anywhere in Devon and Cornwall. Most latterly, that has been an Amazon depot. And pick up on what Simon was saying, part of that increased business rate base has been helping us be financially viable and sustainable going forward. There's an interesting dimension to this about how we can use that investment or that revenue to reinvest, if you like, in high streets across the district, potentially. And I do think in relation to high streets, there is some evidence that particularly for smaller centres, for district centres, they are seeing less of a reduction in footfall than some of our major city centres, Exeter, for example. And there's an opportunity there. People want seemingly to reconnect with the high street. And certainly from where I live, I've seen a recent example where the farmers market has gone online. You can order goods from all of those different suppliers, and they can now be delivered by electric cargo bike, which for me, in terms of local sourcing, carbon benefits, is a really great idea and something that we could and should be doing more to promote, I think, as a district. And just on that, just wanted to mention the Adapt and Thrive programme, the business support programme that Rob has been leading. That is about helping to get digital presence, to get online, and to help our retailers, for example, in that respect. And sorry, just a couple of last points, Chair. One was around recovery planning. The paper that went to the October Cabinet endorsed the Team Devon approach. There is a new spirit of collaboration, I think, in terms of recovery planning across Devon. And for me, there's no reason why that can't cascade down into East Devon, Team East Devon, in terms of how we work with all our partners, with our towns, to really push forward, new models of how we support the high street and more widely how we support recovery, innovation, adaptation, and a more resilient economy going forward. And finally, just to say that on resources, there are papers coming to Cabinet that deal exactly with that. There are immediate kind of urgent items from my perspective. The additional restrictions grant monies that we've been awarded need to be deployed, but there are opportunities there equally through 2021 and early 21, I would suggest, as early as possible, to really think about how we drive, some of the change and adaptation that I think people and the speakers have referred to today. I'll shut up at that point, but thank you.
Okay, thanks. Right, Councillor Ian Hall, please.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, just to clarify, were you asking Councillor Hartnell to add that to the recommendation, which I've seconded? The second area is we've been looking at this paper, what was in front of us today. We've had a good look at it. We're looking on its merits. We're looking from the lens of the people with boots on the ground. We have had started our debate as members, and then with the greatest respect, and Andy Wood does a fantastic job, and officers come in. Just as we're actually get some context, we've got a recommendation, and I'm just a little bit perplexed that that's come in, and now it's like, where are we now? So Councillor Hartnell has made a recommendation. I've seconded it. You've come in and given a couple of ideas. Now, are you adding that to what Councillor Hartnell was recommended?
No, I'm not. I suggest that's why they were suggestions, and I wanted to get to know what the committee thought about these. I would like us to have a recommendation from someone to say that the High Street Duff is closed, is finished with, because that would tie up a loose end. But I made the suggestion of the Working Party if it would help, because I want to make absolutely sure that when this goes to Cabinet, people know exactly how it's going to work. Is it going straight to the Economic Development Team, or are we, as members of the Overview Committee, going to have some further oversight of it? That's all. It's a suggestion. If your committee doesn't go with it, that's fine. Okay. Councillor Hall, did you want to come back? Or have you gone?
Oh, I'm still here, Chair. So we have a recommendation from Councillor Hartnell. I'll second it.
Right, okay. Yeah. Well, we have a couple of more speakers and we will definitely vote on Councillor Hartnell's recommendation in due course. Okay. Right. Councillor Desarum.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would be happy to support your recommendations that the High Street TAF is closed. I'd like to suggest that the High Street TAF is closed and the committee recommend that we look to examine both digital and traditional methods for the enhancement of the High Street once the COVID has been recovered. So I'm not going to set time periods, as you said, 4 times a year, but I think we could something to say that we note this and we would look to activate it as soon as possible, because I know some of the speakers talked about speed. So I think this forms a happy compromise, which is, I think, something we're looking to do. So I put that to the committee and thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Blakey, Kevin Blakey.
Thank you, Chair. Essentially, I agree that with your suggestion that the TAF should be closed. I think it is too slow acting for the circumstances in which we find ourselves. But I have to say, I also think that a working party would be similarly too slow. So close the TAF, yes, but I would actually give more delegated authority to the economic unit to do what is necessary and react quickly whenever things change, as they do, it seems, on an hourly or daily basis.
Okay, yes, right. Thank you for that. Councillor Val Ranger, please.
Yes, so we're just we are able now, aren't we? I'm just confirming that we are able to put forward other recommendations. We don't just have to have one recommendation. So I would just like to say with Councillor Hartnell's recommendation, where it finished off saying something about managing through COVID-19, to just add on the words "and beyond," because you know we won't be in COVID-19 hopefully forever. The other recommendation I would like to make is that the Our Town study, as it exists, is, I don't know how to word it, abolished, and instead, in a new form, becomes part of the working towards the local plan. If someone can help me with wording that, if other people think that's appropriate.
Okay, does anybody wish to second that recommendation? Okay, Councillor Desarum.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I would say perhaps recommend incorporation into the local plan, that Our Town study is abolished and instead we would recommend incorporating many of the proposals into the new local plan in order to provide a digital and modern way of looking in the high street for that sort of, because that shows we're looking forward as well as back, because I think it's really important that high streets move forward because otherwise obviously they won't survive.
Yes, okay, right, agree with that one. Councillor Hartnell.
Thank you, Chair. Quite happy to incorporate both the proposals that have been suggested from Councillor Ranger. Totally agree with what Councillor Blakey said concerning the working party would not be effective. I don't think it wouldn't react fast enough, and I think we've got an excellent economic development team that we can entrust with making sure that the relevant support gets to our high streets. So quite happy to accept the amendments, I suppose, as they are, with regard to adding on the words "and beyond" at the end of my proposal, and also to include the closure of the TAF, and that's not really relevant at this time. Not sure about the Our Town study. I think possibly we should knock that on the head as well and look towards the local plan development, bringing forward all the evidence and information that we need to gather on our high streets. So I'd include that as well. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Right, so Anita, are you clear as to the proposal for recommendation, please?
Right, I've got quite a lot written down. So Councillor Hartnell's original recommendation stands, which is recommend to Cabinet that £50,000 is diverted to assist the economic development team to work with our key coastal and market towns. And I've added including Cranbrook to include councils and key businesses, stakeholders and investors, better understand challenges, opportunities and aspirations of each town and work collaboratively to attract funding and support businesses through the COVID pandemic and beyond. So there's that one. I would need Councillor Hall just to confirm that he's happy to second the addition of including Cranbrook and beyond.
On that issue, Chair, on the Cranbrook and beyond, yes, I am happy to carry on seconding.
Right, okie dokie. That then leads us to a second recommendation. Again, I think from Councillor Hartnell, to close the High Street tab. I think we leave that as one item. And then perhaps the more contentious one is to, perhaps using Councillor Ranger's words, to incorporate the Our Towns study. You might want to change that wording, to incorporate the Our Towns study in the work, in the new local plan work, to include a digital, I didn't quite get all the words, a digital and forward-thinking plan or forward-thinking process. Is that, Councillor Ranger, is that where you were going with that?
Councillor Ranger? Oh, have we lost her?
Afraid it looks like Councillor Ranger's dropped out of the meeting just a few moments ago, Chair.
Okay. I think we've got the gist of it. It's Councillor Hall whether, well, Councillor Hartnell and Councillor Hall, whether you're content to recommend that. I think it's that, I think the TAF is, closing the TAF seems to be not contentious. It's where you want to go with the final one if you want to recommend that I think what I'm hearing is not the Our Town study, but the process of considering something similar. Whether whether Rob Murray can put some words to that, perhaps.
Chairman, would it be easier if we actually just voted on the closing of the TAF as one item? Because this could get a little bit confusing as we go along, because we've got the original amendment from Councillor Hartnell with the slight change at the end, which I'm quite happy to second. And then we're on about changing the title and adding the digital. I can see we're going to start to drift if we're not. So I think if we actually vote on the TAF, if that is taken off, I think that would probably be a good step, and then we can concentrate on the actual original recommendation, which has been seconded with a couple of additional words from Councillor Ranger. Just a suggestion, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, okay. Right, so Anita, are we okay with that?
Yeah, if you want to work through, so that gives us two recommendations, the longer recommendation from Councillor Hartnell, which I can reread, and then the second recommendation to close the TAF, and then move forward to something else from there if you're content.
Yes,
shall I reread the longer recommendation, or members can?
Yes, please. Yes.
Okay. So recommend to Cabinet that £50,000 is diverted to assist the economic development team to work with our key coastal and market towns, including Cranbrook, to include councils and key business stakeholders and investors, to better understand challenges, opportunities and aspirations of each town and work collaboratively to attract funding and support businesses through the COVID pandemic and beyond. So that's recommendation one. Second one is straightforward to close the High Street TAF, and that's both of those proposed by Councillor Hartnell and seconded by Councillor Hall. So if we're happy with that. Debbie, do you want to do the vote, or shall I? Or
Oh, shall I take you through the next steps, Chair?
Please do, yes.
Okay, members of the committee, please, if you'd like to use your green tick if you're voting for the proposals, use your red X if you're voting against, or raise your blue hand to abstain. For those who are watching online, the vote is now taking place. And I'm just going to admit Councillor Val Ranger, but we are at a point, Chair, where we have 7 votes for, none against and no abstention, so that is carried.
Thank you very much. Okay. Right. Has Councillor Ranger returned? Can you hear us, Val?
Sorry. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, sorry, my internet just failed. Yes, sorry.
Okay, never mind. All right. Would you just like to read out your proposal again, please?
Oh, I think Marcus Hartnell read it. Did Marcus, Councillor Hartnell, made a better job of it than I did?
Okay, so all right. So you're not prepared to go you're not prepared to carry on with it.
I am. No, I think Marcus reworded because my proposal was that we did not continue with the our town study and instead diverted time and energy and funds into the local plan going forward.
so, Chair, if I may,
Yes,
that would then be an additional recommendation, which actually will deal with the report itself. That we do not continue. The council does not. We recommend to Cabinet to not continue with the Our Towns study and to divert resources to the new local plan process.
Yes,
okay.
And that's in addition to the other recommendations. So I'm not saying that we can still support the town in the short term. Yes.
Okay.
So Councillor Ranger, in your absence, we voted on Councillor Hartnell's long recommendation and then a straightforward recommendation to close the TAF, and waited for your return for this one.
Thank you. Sorry.
Okay. Could I have a seconder for Councillor Ranger's proposal, please?
Happy to second it, Chair. Could we also add in a bit about digital? I think we did touch on that in earlier, Councillor Ranger's earlier point, that we would be working towards a digital future as well on the high street. So I'm happy to second it. And if we can also introduce a digital point to it.
Councillor Ranger?
Happy with that. Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Right. Thank you. Before we go to the vote for that, Councillor Hall, you have your hand up. Did you wish to add something?
Thank you, Chair. If we change the name and adjust and go with Councillor Ranger's recommendation, one thing I think we've got to be mindful of, we don't want it to go as slow as what our option was before we came into discussion today.
Yes,
we need it to move forward straight away. What we do not want to do is get bogged down and it gets chucked around and then we end up doing nothing. This is actually to speed up the process. Now, all I would say is with the vote what's already been taken and it was clearly carried, is that's going to be the best mechanism for us to get some speed, necessary speed into this, brilliant. But alternately, if what Councillor Ranger is saying, that could equally be as fast, or if not quicker, then I think that needs to be considered by the members.
Okay, thank you. Anybody wish to say anything about that? No. Okay, all right. Well, in that case, as nobody else wishes to speak, I can't see any blue hands. Let's vote on Councillor Ranger's proposal, please. Debbie? Oh, sorry, Anita.
Again, if I've just added the digital wording. So just picking up the digital point, which Councillor Sarum raised, and Councillor Ranger mentioned the first time, so hopefully that's accepted. So that the committee recommends to Cabinet to not continue with the Our Town study and to divert resources to the new local plan process with a focus on a digital future in addition to the recommendations above. Does that work?
Chair, may I just clarify?
Sorry, who was that? Sorry. I can't say.
Sorry, Chair, may I clarify?
Oh, yes. Sorry, Rob. Yes, go on.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Apologies. I'm using the web program and I can't see where to raise a blue hand. Can I just clarify, when you're talking about directing resources, is it the £50,000 that have been agreed for the Our Towns project to now go towards the local plan?
No.
What resources are we talking about?
Shall I respond?
Yes, Councillor Angel, yes, go ahead. Yeah.
So we were saying that we did not want to put officer time into the Our Towns study. So officer time needs to go into the local plan. So that's the resource that I'm talking about, the human resource of officer time. And just to clarify, when I have supported, the digital presence, I'm also very much in favour of invigorating our high streets, in the physical presence as well. So I would not want anybody to think that I was suggesting that the future is digital, 100%, because I think it's really important that people are in our towns. But that,
okay.
Thank you for clarifying
I missed that when my internet went down. So I'm sorry if I'm feeling slightly.
Well,
thank you.
Okay, I have a blue hand from Councillor Desarum. Bruce?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I would endorse what Councillor Ranger said, and I think it's about a 50-50, getting the right 50-50 mix that encourages traditional footfall in the high street combined with a modern thinking digital presence on the high street as well. Because what we wanted to do is obviously get ahead of Amazon and eBay. I think that's what we said in some of the debate tonight, that what we were looking to do is get the shops to have a digital presence so they can compete with Amazon and eBay. And that's I think what I was trying to assist Councillor Ranger with in her motion.
Okay, thank you. We'll have a couple more blue hands. Councillor Blakey, Councillor Woodward, Councillor Hall. Councillor Blakey, Kevin.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, if I can ask a question of Rob Murray. Rob, the funding for the Our Towns study, if we decide that we're not going to proceed with the Our Towns study and we're going to put our efforts elsewhere, are there any legal implications, financial implications with regard to that funding? For example, does it have to be repaid from whence it came, or what are the terms under which that funding was raised?
Thank you, Kevin. That's a good question. Having reread the Cabinet report from the 27th of November where the Our Towns funding was approved, it's to come from, it was being ring-fenced from the retained business rates, I think from the business rate pilot. Again, Simon will correct me if I'm wrong, but that's a significant sum of funding that was to be used to support or to fund the Our Towns study at the level of £50,000. The only condition around that, I think, that I'm aware of, is that funding needs to be used for economy or economic development projects. I'm not aware of any other restrictions or implications.
Simon, do you want to confirm that, please?
Yes, certainly, Chair. Yeah, that's correct. So it's a reserve for the council, so it's within the council's gift of how that reserve is spent.
Okay, right. Okay, good. Councillor Woodward, Tony.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think one of the words I heard about was focusing on digital in the local plan. But I think then following on from Bruce's comment, it should be an equal approach to both the sort of standard high street and in the local plan and digital. So it's not focusing on digital. I think that would give the wrong impression.
Okay, thank you. Right, Councillor Hall, Ian.
Thank you, Chair. What we also got to be mindful of, if we are diverting and doing this for the development of the local plan, we've got to ensure that we collect the data for the economic team so that they actually have the evidence from this potential change of direction, which I'm sure that Cabinet will consider.
Okay. Okay, yes. Rob, did you want to come back on that? About the collecting data? Oh, I can't hear him. Has he gone?
Well, the data. I'm sorry, Chair. Did you address that to me?
I did. Sorry. Yes. Yes.
Yes. I'm pleased you mentioned the data. Thanks, Councillor Hall. I was going to recommend before I made some notes around the wording of the what was to be redirected towards the local plan. And for me, it made sense wording around that the high street and town centre data, the high street and town centre data gathering underpinning the Our Town study is incorporated into the evidence-based development for the new local plan, including town centre planning policies. That to me seemed to make sense, because it means that we can enshrine that the same evidence that we wanted to collate and the same understanding that we wanted to produce with the Our Town study will be captured within the evidence-based commissioning for the new local plan. But it's your call.
Okay, good. Right. That seems to be good. Okay, Anita, can I hand over to you, please?
Yes, joint double act, I think, Rob and I, because I think that if Councillor Ranger and Councillor Desaram are happy to insert Rob's wording there, his more technical wording to pick up the diversion of resources. Does
yes,
that work?
yes, I'm satisfied as long as it makes perfect logic.
Okay, Councillor Ranger.
Yes.
Have we lost her? Oh no.
Oh, no.
She's here. Councillor Ranger.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Right.
Okay.
Rob, can you repeat that? So if the beginning of the recommendation is that the committee recommends to Cabinet to not continue with the Our Towns study, and then your wording.
If I can decipher my scribble, it's that the high street and town centre data gathering underpinning the Our Town study is incorporated into the evidence-based development for the new local plan and town centre planning policies, or words to that effect.
Oh, going so well. That's fine. So if members are happy with that, Debbie, do you want to move to the vote?
Okay. Members of the committee, if you'd like to vote, please using your green tick if you're in support of that proposal, your red X if you're against it, or your blue hand if you're abstaining. For those watching online, the vote is now taking place. And that is carried, Chair, with 8 votes. Your full committee are in support.
Thank you very much indeed, Debbie. Okay, right. So moving on to agenda item 9, the forward plan. The purpose of this item is to agree the forward plan of the work for the committee. The committee will meet on the 13th of January 2021, which will be a joint budget meeting with the Scrutiny Committee. The next overview committee meeting will be on the 28th of January. Regarding scoping future work, may I remind members that proposal and scoping forms for members have to be submitted to be prepared by officers. I will first invite non-members to speak by raising their virtual blue hand. Once non-members have spoken, I will then invite members of the committee to speak. Non-members, please indicate if you wish to speak. Debbie, do we have any non-members?
No blue hands so far, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay. Members of the committee, please indicate if you wish to speak. Right, there are none. Okay, right. Okay. So looking at the forward plan document, at the present time, there are a number of items that are outstanding. I'm aware of Councillor Hall's request for the assisted housing needs to be looked at. I think that's a very important topic which has my support. And I'm also very keen that we follow on from the strategic planning meeting recently that looked at the effect of climate change on rising sea levels. And I think we need to have a look at the entire district, not just one particular part of that. So that's my suggestions for our work in the next couple of meetings. Okay. Does anyone have any comments for recommendations for that, please? Councillor Hall?
Thank you, Chair. I don't like to ever duplicate work, but there was discussions earlier in the week. I believe it was in so many meetings this week. Housing forum think tank with John Golding.
Yes, that's right.
Obviously, our very respected strategic lead.
Yeah.
And he was indicating that the housing needs of East Devon needs to be refreshed. Now, all I'm saying is, if that is going to be refreshed, it should be teased out what numbers of assisted housing would be needed in the medium and long term in East Devon. Now, I'm asking you just to keep this on the agenda. But if the officer have a discussion to see this is picked, and therefore that would possibly go through the HRD board, it's necessary the work of overview. I'm doing that so we're not actually duplicating any work within the council.
Okay.
Does that make any sense?
Well, it does. And so sorry to say that you did break up while you were speaking, which is regrettable. And what I understood you to say was, in effect, that you want to keep this assisted housing is on the back burner and see what happens with John Goulding's work. Yeah, okay, that's fine.
Absolutely correct. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Right, okay, no problem at all. I'm just writing that down. Right, okay. So I'm going to push forward with a report about climate change. If anybody has any objection to that, is there any other issue that anybody wishes to bring towards the forward plan at the present time? Okay, all right. Okay. Well, there's nothing to be said. I'm going to take your silence as agreement. Anybody objecting to that? No? Okay, right. Okay, Debbie, I'm going to carry on. So thank you to all.
Chair,
yes?
Chair, can I just ask, are you therefore noting the forward plan as it stands?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, I am noting the forward plan as it stands, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry. All right, so this brings our meeting to a close. May I just remind all those present that the supporting officer will confirm when the meeting is no longer being recorded or going live. And until then,